Let's talk about what the NBA needs to do to stop load management and tanking. And this will also fix a lot of other problems that the NBA currently has. So, we're going to go through a PowerPoint. Here on this first slide, I have pay players to win, not just be on the roster. So the improvements here: less tanking, less load management. I have here less Ja Morant situations. When it comes to Ja Morant, I don't even know what exactly is going on. Is he actually injured? Is he sitting out because he's displeased with the Grizzlies? Is there some combination thereof? We just have a very uncertain situation with Ja Morant, and this will directly help that. And then I also have less Spurs caution. So if you watch the San Antonio Spurs, you'll notice that there's this abundance of caution mindset where a player has to be 100% pristine before they let them back on the court, and it's just overly cautious. And so what happens is these players they miss more games than they need to because the Spurs are too cautious. So this will also get rid of that. And so to illustrate the Ja Morant situation, and of course this happens with other players, but Ja Morant obviously has some problem with the Memphis Grizzlies, but he's also been injured. And so looking at his game log, we can see that there are multiple blocks where he is inactive and missing games, and then he comes back for a few games and plays, and then he's inactive again. And so this type of situation is just it's problematic. It's uncertain, it's vague. He's being paid the entire time, despite I don't think he's actually injured enough to the point where he can't play. But I don't know. There's just a lot of uncertainty with the Grizzlies, and I think a lot of this stems from just Ja Morant being displeased with the coach or the current situation, whatever it is. But the point here is that we just want to see more basketball games where the best players are playing and the teams are actually competing. So the solution is to install minimum thresholds. And the first threshold is very important. It's a 30 win threshold. So what happens under my proposal is that the players get a 50%, they get guaranteed 50% of their salary, and then they have to earn 50% through wins. And the threshold to unlock that entire 50% is 30 wins. And for each win the team earns, the team accumulates, the players are going to earn 1.67% of their total salary. So if you multiply 30 by 1.67, you will get to 50%, and that will be the other part of their salary. So this way, the players aren't guaranteed their entire contract. They're only guaranteed 50%. That's the base. And then the rest has to come through performance. And it's through team performance, not individual performance. So at 30 wins, you unlock 100%. And then under 30 wins, you get paid proportionally according to those wins. So, and keep in mind that with 30 wins, most teams are going to win at least 15 games. So they're still going to get at least 70%, 75% of their salary as long as they win 15 games. And then from there, it's just a matter of moving upwards until you hit 30 wins. So despite it being only 50% guaranteed, it's not as much of a shift as you might think. It's just that you need to move past those 15 wins, those 20 wins, and get to 30 before you get all of your salary. And this is for all of the players across on the team. It's not just the stars, it's every single player on the roster. And by the way, I don't have this applying to the front office or to the coach, but if there's a way to do this, then I would be all for the players, not the players, the front office and the coaches also being incentivized to hit 30 wins. I think this would be enough on its own because the players are not going to leave money on the table, or they're not going to want to leave money on the table. But I would like to see a less of a guarantee for the front offices, the general manager, the coach, etc. I just don't know how feasible that is. So we're just focusing in on the players. On the other side of this, the money doesn't go back to anyone else but the players. It just goes to the players whose teams are performing the best. So if you hit 50 wins, and then for each win above 50, you start to get a distribution for those wins. So if you hit 51 wins, you get one win times whatever is in the pool. Then that money can go to these winning teams. So a team that wins 57 games, they're going to get 7 games multiplied by the distributions for those wins. So a few thoughts to start with. The NBA needs to get away from the championship or failure mentality. We've seen this for decades, and Shaquille O'Neal has really emphasized that if you don't win an NBA championship, then you're in another category. And of course, Charles Barkley has been the recipient of a lot of just he's at the end of a lot of jokes. There's a lot of negative stigma around players who never win a championship, but it doesn't mean that you weren't a successful player, that you weren't a good player, that you weren't a part of some really good teams. It just means that you didn't win a championship. And the NBA championship is largely dependent on circumstance. So if you have a, let's say, an elite player, a legendary player on a bad team, they're going to be limited by how much they can do. Even if they're on a good team, they only have a chance of winning the championship. So it we need to get away from the championship or failure. The season can still be a success without winning the NBA championship, and that's what I have here. It's not true anyway, and so that needs to go away. There can be success in having a really good season, making it far in the playoffs. Of course, is I think more people are looking at playoff success favorably, but it also needs to be true for the regular season. And so, what this does is it makes the regular season count more, and that's what I have on the next bullet point. Makes the regular season matter, which the NBA desperately needs to happen. And what I've proposed here is kind of like the NBA Cup if you had more consequences to it and you applied it to the regular season. And so one thing I couldn't help but note from the NBA Cup, and it's not like this wasn't already in the air, but it becomes very obvious when you watch the NBA Cup is that players truly care about that extra money. Even the players that are multimillionaires, they still care about that extra money. And when you put it in the light of not just additive, but you can lose money if you're not performing and your team's not performing, then I think you'll get increased intensity. We'll get all of the effects that we're after, and we'll get them directly versus trying to have more superficial rules and policies that can be worked around and ultimately will not be successful. So, a few more thoughts. This is going to trim the fluff and ambiguity, and we're going to get right to the point. So, we're going to focus on what matters, which is winning versus when you have players who are holding out or they're just not sure if they want to play. Look at Jimmy Butler with the Miami Heat, that type of situation. We get away from that. Players are aligned with winning and team performance. And so it gets away from a lot of the side stories where players become disinterested. We heard Jimmy Butler say he lost the joy from the game. We get away from that because now the focus is on we need to win versus I have money coming to me regardless. So now, with showing up to training camp, I'm just going to show up. It's like the first day of school. Everyone's just kind of there seeing what's new, but there's not that focus and there's not the intensity from a lot of players. Now, for someone like Victor Wembanyama, first of all, he's openly stated money's not what's a focus for him. He's more focused on winning. He's on a different path. He's thinking with a different mentality. But for a lot of players, this is they have the certainty and the guaranteed money. So it's not as if their focus is on team basketball. And of course, when we know when the season starts, there are maybe 7 teams with a legitimate chance of winning the NBA championship. So for those other 23 teams, what exactly are we doing here? And maybe 5 of those teams are actually building towards something where they can be in that competing pool. But there are several teams, over half of the league, where you're not winning a championship. So what exactly are you doing? Now there's more of a focus. Now there's a direction. We need to make sure that we're hitting this minimum baseline. And then we also want to aspire to get to those 50 wins. So we're going to get the best versions of players and teams. So just a few scattered points on why this works. First of all, this is going to end tanking because losing now costs players money directly. So, for example, with Lauri Markkanen, he's he's much less likely to go along with what the Jazz are doing with going ahead and sitting out games with mystery illnesses. And so front offices aren't going to be able to quietly tank when the roster pushes back because the players will be pushing to make their money. That will be certain. It also reduces the load management. We talked about the Spurs and their overabundance of caution and making sure that the player is 1,000% before they can return. It's understood that you need to make sure that you're not sending a player back out there to get injured, but there's also a line that crosses into where you're just being absurd. This came up either last season or the season before with Victor Wembanyama, where Victor had to. I can't remember the situation, but I think it was the doctor on YouTube. I think his name is Brian. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but there's a very well-known doctor on YouTube who does a great job breaking down injuries. And he talked about how the Spurs were being ridiculous with their management and over resting of Victor Wembanyama and holding him out of games. Of course, there's also the matter where we had overlap with the Spurs looking to lose because they wanted to enter the lottery. But this takes care of all of that because now the players are going to push for this and it's going to be a real matter of emphasis. So every win matters and stars have skin in the game for regular season effort. By the way, I had the points for this PowerPoint all written out, and then I had AI create a PowerPoint on it. So this is not all written by me. And then it also forces team play first. So this is something we also haven't seen too much, is where we have a focus on the team performing better versus the individual, because now it's the star players are going to look beyond themselves and not just possibly looking better for their next contract, but they want their team to perform better. So now we have even more of an alignment with winning basketball versus individual basketball. It's not just about winning awards and accolades. This is about racking up wins. So there's a shared incentive, and we'll see a decrease in selfish play because that's going to hurt financially. And then next, injured players still protected. So even if a player's out for the season, their ability to earn money is not affected beyond just the fact that they're not on the floor. So I think of Tyrese Halliburton. If the Pacers still win 30 games, Tyrese Halliburton still gets all of his money. So everybody's all in on this. It doesn't matter if you're at the end of the bench. It doesn't matter if you're out for the season. Your salary is still tied to the win. So you're vested in the team. And this keeps the money with the players, so there's nothing going to the owners. There's no redistribution other than to the player. The money just goes back to other players. So even if you don't hit your 100% on your salary because you don't get to 30 wins, the money will still be going to other players. So I think that's important. The problem here is we have guaranteed money, and when you have guaranteed money, it removes consequences, and it's just you're not aligned with exactly what your in this case with what your job is. So when you think about jobs that are outside of sports and you look at the ability to earn, that is contingent on your ability to show up and perform. If you're not showing up and performing, then it's only a matter of time before you are fired. And I think we need to have more alignment in the NBA, because the guaranteed money has made things, you see the cushion that it provides, and then you also see the result of the cushioning. Again, for some players, it doesn't matter. Victor Wembanyama is going to play the same no matter what the money is. But for other players, for front offices, for coaches, it's different because everything is guaranteed, and so the behavior shifts, and we need to have that behavior shift back to what is more natural, which is that you earn through performance rather than existence. So when players get paid regardless of outcomes, the incentive to compete really it mostly disappears, other than pride. And we've seen some players they don't take pride in what they do. Other players are going to put in that work. You can see the players that are just they're focused, and they're going to make sure that they are optimal for the season. They're taking care of themselves. I think Steph Curry comes to mind. He really puts in the work. Like you can tell, like I can't stand him. He on the court, his antics bother me, but like I can still you can still see what shines through is his work that goes on when he's not on the court. It's not an accident that he is undersized and he is able to compete and still compete at later in his career at a very high level. So for a player like Steph Curry, it's not this wouldn't this is not really a problem, but for so many other players around the league, it is, because once the guarantee is in place, then that affords them the ability to go off and do whatever, and they're not as concerned with winning and moving forward. So guaranteed money. If we don't have this, then there's no financial penalty. Coasting is rational. Rest becomes normal. Again, we have load management, and that's something we need to get away from. We saw this with Greg Popovich. I really think of him as the one who started this all. It was always an inevitability, but with Greg Popovich, you saw the Spurs come to this realization: hey, winning in the regular season matters only to a point, and once we reach that point, we can go ahead and fade back and then go ahead and start optimizing for the playoffs. And that was, I mean, there's logic behind that, so there's good strategy there. The bad part is it's bad for the league, it's bad for the game, and of course we know the NBA is an entertainment product. And so if you have teams that are more thinking more strategically and resting players and really minimizing the number of minutes they played because they've realized how to maximize, injury risk, and playoff performance, career longevity, etc. We need to make sure that that is not coming about at the expense of the game. And so this again is going to protect the game. It's going to protect the league. It's going to make the product a better product. And so again, and then also here, tanking is not. This is AI writing this. This isn't what I would have written, or wrote. But with tanking, it's not a viable strategy here. It becomes very very difficult to tank under this proposal. Let's see here. And so one reason this is so direct, it gets right to the point. Players lose money if they don't hit 30 wins. If their team doesn't hit 30 wins, is because there needs to be harshness to this. If you lack the harshness, then and then you can get around this. Like, there are loopholes. We've seen so many teams, so many front offices expose the loopholes and go through them over and over through the years. And so any rules or policies that are instituted, they're not going to have the same effect. And so you can see this with, let's say we had it to the point where the medical staff or an independent doctor needs to certify that a player is actually injured, et cetera. That can still be manipulated. Let's say it's the team doctors. We know the team doctors are going to go along with whatever pressure they get from the team. They're going to be under pressure to go ahead and say that a player is injured, even if they're really not. If the front office wants the player to sit out, that's where they're going to go. So when you start to look towards those type of avenues, when you start to look towards fines, when you look at the team fines, look at the Jazz being fined last season, it didn't matter. And so even though the message was, hey, we don't like what you're doing, the team is doing it anyway. Also, the NBA is under pressure to enforce this, and we've seen the NBA has difficulty when it comes to enforcing some of their rules and policies against certain teams. So we don't want to allow for loopholes, because then we get back to where we are, where it's like there's some type of soreness, or maybe this is a maintenance or a precaution, or there's an illness there, it's made up. If we start to look for ways that a player can actually uh, accrue the percentages, get to the 30 wins without actually there being some type of cutoff, then we revert back to where we are, which is a manipulation of the system. And this way, it's very open and harsh. And I think that's what you want. You want that harshness, because the harshness brings out the incentive. When you think about other people who aren't in the NBA, there is a harshness to life, right? Like, if you don't do something, if you don't do X, you are going to suffer the consequence. There are very rare situations where you are just guaranteed money for a long time, and your performance is not tied to anything. And so you can have this contract, and if you don't perform, you're still going to get paid unless you do something egregious. So the NBA has fallen into this, and they need to get out of it. And I think this is a really good way to get out of it. You still have a base amount of money, which of course we know that even with the minimum salary in the NBA, you're still going to make a decent amount of money. And now you're incentivized to see your team do as well as possible. So why 30 wins? It doesn't have to be 30 wins. This is just a number I came up with. I'm sure this can be optimized, but you have 30. This is going to be a 36.5% winning percentage. It creates a new standard. So the standard is, hey, I think of the Mendoza line in baseball. So I think that's a 200 batting percentage as like the cutoff for I don't know if it's like a major league player, whatever the cutoff is that you have that Mendoza line. With 30 wins, it would create a new standard in the NBA. Like, hey, we need to have at least a 30 win season. And something now is on the line, even for bad to below average teams. So of course we know this is a league. Some teams are going to be great. Some teams are going to be very good. Some teams are good. Some teams are above average. Some teams are right in the middle at 500. Some teams are just below average. So we have that distribution, but we want the low end to be around 30 games. And so this is going to help with that. Late games are going to matter. So late games in the season, even if you have a poor team or a below average team, the game is still going to matter. So the Kings versus the Wizards still very much matters in game 74 of the regular season. So you can rebuild your team, but you won't be embarrassing the league. We're not going to watch a situation where we see a team struggling with whether or not they're going to win 10 or 11 games. I think we're going to see less of those seasons, because now the incentive will be going the other way, and the incentive will be to get to 30 games and not to lose as many games as possible. And the players will put real pressure on the front offices if this is the case. So 50 wins gives another milestone. It gives new meaning to a 50 win season. Again, end of the season games matter. It's not just for a better record; it's for better money, and it's okay to go for records. I think this is a really nice additional benefit. Is that, let's say you have a team that is going for a franchise high of 65 wins, but there's no other reason for them to play, and so there's that injury risk. Now we don't have to grapple with the injury risk. We can just go ahead and go for the record, because we're trying to win anyway. So again, the regular season now matters. The end of the season matters. We're not going to see 15% of the 15% of the schedule just go by the wayside because the games don't really matter. The regular season matters. The end of the regular season matters. So this is very, very important. This gives additional incentive beyond just the playoffs, beyond seeding, to win. And so it's a good milestone for very good teams. We can celebrate the regular season. All right. And so I have your proof of concept. And so I get back to the NBA Cup with this. Yeah, the NBA Cup I mean, the NBA Cup is a really good starting point for this type of change because we saw that when the money is on the line, the players really cared. So higher intensity, playoff atmosphere, more effort, and so if we have this with this tournament, and it's just about winning additional money, imagine if the player's salary is actually on the line. So let's go over some potential critiques. Wins aren't controlled by the individuals. And so that's the point. The NBA is a team competition. This forces shared responsibility. So, yeah, I mean, you're in with your team. You're there with your team, and it's a collaborative effort. So it's not just going to be about you. And this is going to make players care more about practices. This is going to make players care more about being on the same page and working together. So just because yeah, you can't individually control how much money you make, but now there's a real incentive for you to make your team work. And so, like, we won't see the type of situation where, let's say, there's uh, division within the team. Okay, but we need to figure this out because we need to work together for the shared goal of making sure that we get paid our full salary. Then we have another potential critique is that injuries make this unfair. And then so yeah, I mean when someone gets injured, it's bad fortune all around. Like everyone suffers. The league suffers, the team suffers, the individual obviously suffers, but the injured players can still earn a full salary. So this is harsh in a way, but not harsh in the sense that if you're injured and you're out for the season, you're still you're still pulling for your team to win 30 games because if they do, you're still going to get paid your full salary just as you would now with your guaranteed money. But now it's like, hey, I'm going to try to help out the team. I'm going to be another coach in here. I'm going to encourage the players. I'm going to tell them what I'm seeing, share more insights, right? Like I'm sure some players already do this, but now there's going to be that as well. So you're really the energy, the momentum is there for the team. Let's see. So this punishes good players on bad teams. Uh, yeah, so I think you could say, well, if you're a player and you're a star player and you're making a max contract and you're on a bad team, there's a real concern here. But that should be there. Like we want that concern is that we want if there's a good player on a bad team, then go ahead and make the situation better by improving your play and by making your teammates better. So I think another benefit here is we get more of an optimization of play rather than a player looking to score as many points as possible. Now that's not the incentive. The incentive is to become a better overall team player. And then I have here the NBPA will likely reject this, which is true. Obviously, this is just a proposal. This will work. This will work. In real life, is this going to happen? No, probably not. But if you have a problem, you have to fundamentally fix the problem. And applying superficial policies and rules, again, this it's not going to happen. It's not going to work. Not to the degree that you'd want it to affect real change. So is this likely to happen? No, of course not. But this shows you exactly what would need to be the type of measure in place for there to affect real change and for the league to become better and to provide a better product to the fans, to be more entertaining, to have the focus more on basketball versus the side stories and the negativity that sometimes is occupies the space around the NBA. Instead of that, we keep going back to the focus being on basketball because it's so intense. I mean, the intensity will be ratcheted up so much more because the players will be fighting and they will be battling every night to reach that 30 wins. And again, you can change the 30 and 50. That's what I have in place, but you can change that to be more optimal. But if players are trying to get to that 30 wins, they are going to play all out. And then if players are within reach of going over 50, then again, they're really going to push for that. And so there's obviously that gulf where you're safe on one side and then you really can't reach the upside. You can't reach the 50 wins. So maybe if altering the number of games either way can help with that, then I'd be all for it. But this is just putting together the model to have in place. So I've talked about the 50 win teams and the incentives and a few more notes. The loopholes can be exploited. We've talked about that. The number of games can be optimized. So it could be 32 and 48 or whatever you'd like it to be. It doesn't have to add up to a particular number, but we need to take away the comfort. We take away the certainty and then we change the behavior. If we change the behavior, better product results. And what I really like too is that this is a change that doesn't alter statistics. So all too often when we see the game change, when we see a new rule or a new policy, what can happen is the statistics are altered. And I dislike that because it it tampers with the integrity of the statistics and the history, and this would not do that. And this fosters refinement and evolution of the game. The game itself becomes more optimized because the alignment, the player's incentive is now optimized. So a league that incentivizes winning will get more effort and a better product, and we have closer alignment with competition. Right now, there's a significant degree of misalignment because there are no direct incentives for each game. So when you are trying to improve the season as a whole, you have to look at all of the individual parts of the season. And so focusing in on the games, we really have two parts of the season. We have the regular season and then we have the playoffs. The playoffs are there, and obviously the playoffs really speak for themselves. The players are trying to win in the playoffs. Like, right, we there's no shortage of the players going all out there, but the regular season is where we see the NBA product really lacking, and I think this is going to directly address this. So, yeah, this is my proposal, and I think lesser guarantees are only going to make the NBA better, and I think you're just going to see players going all out, more battles, more competition, the intensity goes up, and the focus is back on the game of basketball.